It says in Romans 5, verse 6, it says, "For while we were yet weak, in due season, Christ died for the ungodly." In Romans 8, verse 34, it says that, "Who is he that condemneth? It is Christ Jesus that died, and that was raised from the dead, who is at the right hand of God, who also makes intercession for us." Next week is Easter. You know, crucifixion is something that was not really heard of before about, in Judea, before about 70 BC. And it says in Deuteronomy that the accursed shall be hung from a tree. It was not referring to crucifixion. In those days, it was common practice for people who were to be killed would be stoned, and then they would be hung from a tree to show that they were accursed of God. Crucifixion was something that was new and was not brought into Judea until the Romans did it after Pompey's soldiers invaded Judea. But the question which is on many people's minds yet today is, did Christ really die on the cross? Now there's considerable evidence, historical and otherwise, that says that he did. And of course, if you're Christian, you have to believe that he did, because that's the basis of Christianity. But there are many other people who don't. Muslims think that someone was substituted for Christ. Someone else died in his place. There's no evidence for that, but that's what they believe. Because to believe otherwise would make them non-Muslim. Some people believe that he didn't really die, that he just fainted on the cross. That's a little hard to believe too, considering he was beaten so badly beforehand, and he was stabbed in the side. He was taken down from the cross, buried in a tomb behind the 1.5 to 2 ton rock, which had to be rolled uphill to get out, and to survive all those wounds after being buried in 100 pounds of spices. That's a bit hard to believe. Some people believe that the authorities took his body and hid it somewhere else. Kind of ridiculous, considering that if all they had to do was produce the body, would have snuffed out the religion right from the start. But Jesus really did die on the cross. And what happened to the disciples after that is probably ample proof in itself. Because these 12 meek, mild, uneducated people who ran away from Gethsemane suddenly became the boldest people on earth and started a movement, which of course has gone ever since. But whatever you believe, you have to admit one thing, that there is a gulf between God and man at this time. This came ever since the original sin. It's there. It's mentioned of in Luke when he talks about the gulf between the poor man, Lazarus, and the rich man. The gulf. People have been trying ever since the fall to bridge that gulf. In Babel, they built the Tower of Babel to try to build a tower to heaven. Mankind has been building edifices ever since. At Mount Sinai, while Moses was on the top of the mountain, the people below made a golden calf, an idol, to worship. People have been worshiping idols ever since. Sometimes it's an idol, sometimes it's money, sometimes it's their work, sometimes it's drugs and alcohol. But there's always something that people have been trying to bridge this gap with to get to God. None of it's been successful. There have been times when people on this side have glimpsed across that chasm, but they've never actually gone there and come back. was because of man's efforts, probably, that God finally took pity on us and built a bridge himself. The bridge is not very wide, and on first glance it doesn't look very sturdy. But it's in the shape of a cross. And it's the only way to get from this side to the other. Now, unfortunately, we're all going to die at some stage of the game. So we're all approaching this abyss. Some of us are further along the road than others. Sometimes it arrives out of nowhere. Because suddenly you're there when you don't expect it. Other times you see it coming from many months away. But everyone is going into this abyss unless they take the bridge. The bridge is small. It only takes one person at a time. It's one way. That looks pretty flimsy at times. But like Charles Blondin did going across the tightrope across Niagara Falls, when he asked people to get in, do you have the faith to take that bridge? Because you may believe it exists, but unless you have the faith to actually take it, you're going to be stranded on the wrong side of the abyss. It says that you cannot live your life confidently unless you have confidence in eternity. And only by going across that one small, narrow causeway can you get to the other side. Do you have the faith to take it? Many people know about the cross, but they don't believe in it enough to really take it. There's going to be a time when a decision is going to be made for you if you don't make it ahead of time. Everybody needs to understand that the faith is very simple, and the bridge will hold you if you take it. Sometimes people understand this at the most inopportune or unusual circumstances. There's a man named James Webster Wheaton. James Webster Whittle, sorry. There was a clerk in the bank, in the Wells Fargo Bank, during the time of the Civil War in the States. He was enlisted into the side of the North, the Union side, and went to fight with the Illinois Regiment. At the Battle of Vicksburg, he was wounded and taken captive by the Confederate soldiers. He was not a Christian. He never knew anything about Christ. But while he was recovering from his wounds, he was looking for something to read, and the only thing he could find was a Bible. So he read it, and began to understand that perhaps he might consider becoming a Christian. It sort of ignited a spark. That same night that he had read the Bible, he was awakened by the orderly, who told him that there was another prisoner of war who had come in, and who was dying. And would Mr. Whittle pray for him? When he hesitated, the orderly said, I thought you were a Christian because you were reading the Bible. So Mr. Whittle did go and pray for this Union soldier, who was anxious, fearful, worried, and died. While he was praying, Mr. Whittle decided to accept Christ himself. And while he was praying, the other soldier died, but with a peace on his face. You know, the soldier then went on after the war. He recovered and wrote a hymn from his experience. It says, I know whom I have believed. It's a very popular hymn. He wrote it because he made the decision to cross that bridge and went across at the end. It's something very simple. It's not very difficult. It's not a big bridge, and it's not something that probably looks very sturdy from some angles. but it's something we must all decide individually whether we're going to take or not. And this time at Easter, when we look at the cross, it probably is something we all should